to talk about and provide an update for all of our team members on what's happening with some of the changes that you may have heard about with your service coordinator and our leadership team. And these changes are a result of some wage and overtime standards that have changed federally. So first I want to talk about what is the wage and overtime standards. These are regulations from the United States Departments of Labor that we are obliged, we're required to follow around the Fair Labor Standards Act. And it designates employees that must receive overtime pay for over 40 hours of work. So it outlines what that has to be. It designates overtime to be paid at a rate no less than time and a half for the regular hours and establishes the minimum salary required for exempt employees. So exempt employees are those employees who are exempt from the overtime standard because of the position that they're in. Why are they overtime? So basically right now our current service coordinators and much of our leadership team members fall under this exempt requirement. Basically that means is they get paid a salaried amount for the work they do. Sometimes one week that might take 40 hours, one week that might take 30 hours, one week that might take 80 hours, etc. But their wage stays the same for that. And that is really how we've designed our service coordinator positions around that exemption. So why are they revising these overtime regulations? They're revising it really to just address the salary issue. So up until now, the last time it was revised was 2004, and the salary threshold was $23,000 a year, $23,600. Right? So it's been a very long time since they revised it. That's one of the reasons they're revising it. Our current average service coordinator wage is $33,600 a year. That's without bonuses for working hours, but just that current base wage. That's what we're paying people now on average for that position. As of December 1st, 2016, the new salary threshold will be $47,416 a year. So you can see for us that is a huge increase in the minimum amount that we have to pay people for that. And that doesn't allow for any room for how long you've been in the job or somebody who has a master's degree. Just says that is the very minimum we can pay someone for them to qualify for the exempt standards. Right. So what this means for PCL? Well, lots of things. First of all, we're really excited to embrace this change. I believe it's important. I believe that the time has come that these positions be paid more. Unfortunately, our funders haven't passed that increase in payment for us for those positions alongside with those changes. So we have to figure out as an organization, how do we embrace these changes, how do we put these changes in place and maintain a balanced budget and be able to continue to survive. So we just started looking at the numbers. Okay. So the complete fiscal impact, when we did a study on this, we came up with 3 different options. We just kind of ran the numbers. If we stepped with all the current service coordinators we had, did nothing but bring everybody up to that base wage, didn't allow for any compression. And what compression means is if I have a service coordinator who's worked here 30 years and one who's worked here 1 year, if they make the same amount, that's 100% compression. Compression adjustments allow us to have stages in a wage. These budget figures are just based on 100% compression. It means we bring everybody up who is exempt regardless of their role, area director, whatever, HR position, service coordinator. We ran these numbers on just that basic minimum standard. So for that first option, if we brought all 42 of our service coordinators up, it projected a fiscal impact of $1.5 million a year. So that's $1.5 million above our current resources. Obviously, option A was not a very good option, right? So option B was that we make all of our current service coordinators hourly at their current rate and then pay them overtime anytime they work over 40 hours. Given our current staffing situation, we looked at the number of hours our exempt employees have been working, because we've been providing bonuses for them, so that included our behavior assessment team and CBH and our service coordinators. And the fiscal impact of doing that was $1.3 million a year. And so there wasn't a lot of variance between keeping people exempt and not. And our option C was to reduce the number of service coordinators, to stay within our current revenue that we're funded for, the current amount that we're budgeting for those, and to completely sort of look at restructuring how we provide our administrative support. So creating some administrative positions and just take a look at doing what we do differently. Right? This actually says we're maintaining our current payroll cost by balancing the quality of service. We're not quite there yet. We're actually still, the fiscal impact's about $240,000 a year. But that is miles ahead of 1.5 million. So that's kind of where we're looking. So why do we want service coordinators to be hourly versus, why do we want them to be exempt versus hourly? Part of this was working with our service coordinators. So when we first got this news in May, we brought our leadership team together and said, here's the problem. Share this information, work together, and really kind of asked sort of how they felt about it. And most everybody really values that concept of this role, and the position particularly of the leadership of our service teams requires lots of flexibility. It requires you to be able to work a variety of hours. It requires and provides that professionalism to flex your hours. So if I've got an open shift and I work graveyard, then maybe I don't come in and I do my paperwork that next evening after I've slept a little bit. That flexibility just is inherent to this job. So we want to keep our service salaries. The many benefits of that is professionalism. Our team members feel like it's a way to grow, and moving from punching a time clock to exempt position represents professional development. And they told us that that was really important to them. And it will reduce turnover in these key positions. One of the things that we've heard from DSPs and families and case managers over the years is those service coordinators turn over a lot. It's a big job. It's a big job that they have, and the pay wasn't commensurate with that work. So we're hoping that this will reduce that level of turnover. People will want to stay in the position. It will maintain the flexibility of their work schedule. It allows for a more flexible work-life balance that they could create in this job. When maybe you have to work a weekend, it's also nice to know if my son or daughter or niece or nephew has a school event where they're getting an award, I can take off in the middle of the day and go watch that, but also know that I still can get my work done. So it gives you that work-life balance that's really essential in positions like our team leader positions and service coordinators. And, and as important to all those other things, that it provides us with some predictability in budgeting. We have to figure out how to project throughout the year, and if we're just always wondering sort of what those variable costs will be, it's really hard for us to plan for the important things that we need to do as an organization. Does anyone have any questions about things so far? Okay. All right. So we talked about all the things that it means for us. We decided really after looking at all those different options, really the only alternative to us was option C. And option C really started with option A and B don't work. And so what do we do differently? So we brought our area directors together, we brought our service directors together, we brought some key department heads together, and we just started saying, how could we do this differently? Playing with a variety of different ideas. Knowing that what it had to be was larger caseloads for our service coordinators in order to make those numbers work. We kind of did backwards math. We're spending this much money. We divide that wage by it, and how many positions do we get out of it? And that's really where we started. But also knowing there was a lot to do. So what we did was we updated those service coordinator positions, which will now be the team leaders positions, to look at sort of different job duties. Knowing that those jobs are going to be a lot more delegating, orchestrating, tracking, coordinating, leadership, developing teams, and that they're going to have less opportunity for the paperwork. Some of that paperwork that sort of bogs them down. So we couldn't make these changes without also adding some administrative positions. So we added 2 administrative assistants to each area, and we hired an additional quality assurance facilitator. So we did that so that each area will now also have a QA person. So we looked at doing a lot of things differently in this, not just We changed how the team leaders work, but we changed how we're going to do quality assurance, how we'll do that follow-up, and how we'll break those jobs down. Is that making sense? Okay. All right, this one's a little light for you who are in the room looking at it. So we kind of looked at sort of how will those new quality departments and structures work. So in the old structure, all the facilitators worked throughout the whole agency. So all of our quality assurance team kind of went everywhere. Reviews were done for each person supported 2 times per year, and that information was given to their QA, to their service coordinators to update, and facilitators were members of the quality support teams. All right? What's going to be different in those new changes that we put together is facilitators are assigned to an area. So each area is going to, each of our area directors will have a quality assurance facilitator assigned to them, into their teams. The reviews are going to be done for each person supported 2 times per month. So we're going to have opportunity to be more proactive. So we're going to be sort of catching the things that we need to do better at right away, instead of creating big lists of things to do, things that can be easily delegated, easily have other people help them keep up on them. And facilitators will be part of the quality supports team, but they will also be part of their area teams. All right, so they'll be developing relationships with those team leaders who are doing the job on a more regular basis, as well as have that second team, or that's for their second team, but have that first team of their QA coordinators, so they're checking in with each other about the quality of the work they do as a QA facilitator. All right. Do you have any questions about the change to the QA? All right. So we look at organizational structure. It's a little wonky if I put the whole organizational structure chart up here. It gets a little crazy. But this is kind of a sample of an area. So you have a residential, the director, so our executive team members. So we'll use Ginger, for example. Right? Ginger is one of our operational directors for residential services. So she's here at this part of the chart. And then she has 2 area directors. Right? So there'll be 2 area directors under her. We're just going to show you, work one way up to just 1, right? So we're going to use Leslie. Leslie's one of those area directors. Just using this so you get how the org charts is going to work. So that area director, to get all that work done for those team leaders, is going to have the 2 area admin assistants assigned to their area, a quality assurance person assigned to area, and then a designated CBHS person who's going to focus on that area. All this with the idea that these areas will build more relationship-based team building, have a better understanding of what's happening. CBHS will still, because of the way that flow works, what people need, they might have to float around to other areas, but they'll have one designated person in this area for that relationship building, and the vast majority of the people they support, if they need those services, we'll get it for that person, right? We have to allow for a little bit of those tiny little outliers where I just don't connect with that CBHS person, and this one is a better match for my person supported because we want to stay person-centered in this. But those will be the outliers, right? We'll say that won't happen. If it's in the best interest of the person we support, we'll look at that, but we'll try to keep those in there. So and then these are sort of the numbers. Jackie or Sarah, do you want to add anything to that? Okay. So this making sense how that, you see how that's going to be a little bit different? All right. Oh, this is so light. So this is, again, this is all about projection right now. Okay? Remember, this is a lot of change. And we're saying, how do we make this work? So we looked at a team leader, for example, now, who might have, I wish I could remember a caseload, but they might have 3, even 4 different sites, depending on the number of people who live in them. About 8 or 9 people with who will receive service, and up to about 15, maybe to 18, I think, FTE. 18 to 22. Yikes. It's a big number of staff who might be involved in that, right? So they have a big group of people to be managing, getting things done, and then they need that support. So we took down what's the current role of that service coordinator and who could do different things. So while ultimately it's those team leaders' responsibility to make sure all these things get done, they'll have some assistance. So I'm having a really hard time reading it, but I will. Let's say the personnel management and team development. that is going to be really 100% as far as that leadership part in the role of the team leader, right? That's what they'll need to be able to do. The admin assistant might or may kind of help do your timesheets and the paperwork involved in that. Schedule your mappings to make sure that they get done. Schedule for your manager, for that team leader. You know, get some of that paperwork ready for them, but the ultimate responsibility of doing that for all the people within that caseload will be the team leaders. Fiscal management, those things we've looked again, can be shared about that. Can the admin assistants do the end of the month money? These might be things you're not aware of, but your service coordinators have to compile a bunch of paperwork around money and bills and get it all into the office and spend a lot of time at that end of the month paperwork. That might be something where those admin assistants are at right now. We're looking at admin assistants can pick that up for them, right? So they don't have that on their as their burden. It kind of goes down like that. So training and medication administration, right? Making sure you know how to do your job. Making sure that if there's a problem that you're getting some coaching around that. Sort of the big picture things of balancing doctor's appointments and big picture side effects might be your team leader, but configuring the MARs, doing the refills, filling out the paperwork for those. Right now, your service coordinators spend time on that or delegate that out. Now, that's going to be the admin assistant, and they might be asking team members to help with that. So I don't have to go through all of them, but are you following kind of that process? Okay. And then we added some positions in to do that. The admin assistants are not, so they are hourly positions. So they kind of went through sort of documentation things. And I'll send this out so you can read the actual detail on here. It's a little light for here. So what does that mean for you, right? I mean, that's why we wanted to have this conversation. And hopefully your current service coordinator has been talking to you a little bit about what this means for them. Mostly it's about knowing, so we want to know which homes are assigned. We hope that we'll see an increase in retention because you'll see less turnover on who your boss is. You might not see them as much every day, though. I mean, they're not going to be, if they've got 4 different sites to be at, they can't really be at every place every day. They're going to be counting on all of you kind of to step up and help be able to figure out how to have that communication, get some of the day-to-day stuff done when they're not there. And sometimes, I love this quote, because sometimes our life have to be completely shaken up and changed and rearranged to put things where they're meant to be, right? So at first we were all a little, I'm still obviously a little nervous about this. Change is nerve-wracking, but the process has been really enlightening, and we've come up with some interesting and creative ideas. The change to the QA department and that ability to be more proactive, really it was a result of us being forced to look at things differently. And sometimes that is a good thing. So that's what I'm really hoping. I'm really hoping that this change is going to force us to see things more differently, be more efficient. We're kind of looking at, are there things that we can do less of, or are we doing them because we always have done them and maybe they're not necessary? And all that will be really processed. Right. So, kind of the process of all this happens. I'm going to get through this and we'll just kind of have some conversation. So we started this in May, so this has been fast because we didn't know till May. I think we found like May 22nd. We knew this was being talked about federally. There was lots of federal chatter about it, but most of our sources said not till sometime in 2017, if then, and it wouldn't look like, it was, and then just all of a sudden, one day in May, we get this email that says this is happening. And as soon as we did, so we kind of started those conversations. So that's happened. We had interviews, so how it worked for your team leaders, so you understand what happened with service coordinators, is we had the number of positions that were available, and we did a process where everyone who's currently in those service coordinator positions were able to apply for all the positions first. That's why you all didn't see any openings come out when we started this, because the most fair thing to do would be to make sure those people in those positions had the first shot at it, right? And also, I wanted them all to stay employed, right? People have lots of talent. So they also had to have the first shot at the new admin positions, if they didn't get the team leader position, and then they had to have the first shot at that QA position. So Jackie and Flory and a bunch of other people worked their magic and created, We did this like 40-person interview process where everyone was able to say where they hoped they would end up, make a decision. We did a day full of round-robin interviews and people were placed. So all of your service coordinators now know where they're at. Right? So the next question you might ask is, what happened to my service coordinator who didn't get an admin position, who didn't get the QA position, who didn't get the leadership position, sort of, how were they treated and were they treated fairly? And I want to assure you, from our perspective, we were as fair as we could be to everyone. So service coordinators who did not get those positions, there was a handful of them, were offered a couple of things in order to make sure that they maintained and didn't see huge significant financial impact of these changes. That they have history and things that are really valuable to us. So they were first offered the ability to take an area relief position, which pays significantly more, actually, than their current positions right now. So a few people have looked at area relief positions, and if there was an area that matched there better than the other, we let that be an extra person in that position, so they weren't having to be forced. So if I really wanted to be an area relief in Angie's area, but her positions were full, we added one to that, and we said we'll just deal with it through attrition. If that's where you want to be, and you're willing to do it, that's where we put you. The other thing we offered was, we called them enhanced DSP roles. So kind of created special for people who were being displaced. So we looked at our opening list and said, where are we having the most turnover? Where are we having the hardest time with retention? Where could somebody use a really skilled person who has a lot to offer and can help with a lot of things? And they had an offer they could take those positions. And we started those positions at $14 an hour. Now, some of you, I just want to be real honest with you, like, how can you pay them that and all of us not? Well, one, there's like 5 of them. Right? So that's one thing, not 500. And the other is, it's about being fair. For us, it was about making sure that these are people who will be offering, and we're going to be asking them to do more. It's not just any DSP position that they want to take. They can't leave that position and go into another one without checking with us first and making sure they go where we need them. And our expectations of them will be much higher, that they provide help to their team leader, that they take on extra job responsibilities, that they sort of pick up that slack. So, and if they didn't want any of those other options that would have allowed them to keep at least their current income, then they can look at any DSP position they want, but that was at a DSP wage. Does that make sense? Okay. So hopefully, you're hearing that, but our goals in this were twofold, really, when we started this process. 3. Ultimately, we have to comply with federal law. We have this thing that we like to follow, Bureau of Labor Law. It's just something that we like to do, right? And so that was one. One, we want to make sure that whatever we did maintain the best quality service for the people we support. 3, that it had the most reasonable fiscal impact possible, because on top of this, we still have DSP wages to think about, right? So we can't get ourselves in too big of a hole here. And then I guess the last was that everybody be treated fairly. That everybody have a shot at what they wanted to do. We had a very good process where everyone's skills were evaluated, and that nobody in the end of this ended up losing a significant amount of monthly income that they've counted on. We wanted them to be able to stay here if they wanted to, right? And I really do believe that we achieved that. So that's that part of the hiring process. So the caseload assignments are finalized, and I think I can probably post that when I send this out.
So we have an opening.
Oh, that's right. I'll go back. So we might have to wait on that, and I'll explain why in a second about that. But as soon as those are finalized, we'll attach those to this email so you can sort of see. But you can ask your current team leader if you're curious. They know where they're at, and then they can tell you. And then shadowing and the transition process is starting now. Some are already happening, and they're designed to be done by November 27th, I think, something like that. The actual wage changes and all these things happen November 21st. So that's that process, and that is just the beginning. So before I hit the next step, I want to see if you have any questions, comments, thoughts. For those of you who are watching this, there's 500 people in the room. So it takes a while to get through all their questions. Don't scan the audience, Tina. Okay, so that's all rolling. So that is the beginning. So the next part, well, first I want to explain sort of what's happened in the meantime. So in this process, after we did all the hiring, we had one of our team leaders who has decided to move on to another job. We're sad for us, but super excited for him because it's a great job. So now we have an open position. So you might have seen that open team leader position go out. Is it closed?
Monday.
So it closes Monday, so take a look at it. All right, and so we'll be hiring for that. So the reason why we don't want to send those caseload things out yet was because we tried to keep as much consistency as possible with current people who stayed. But now that there's an opening, we want to make sure that no one who's that applied for it said that not everybody got their first choice. So this might have been somebody's first choice. I don't think we've seen any interest yet. Have we? Oh, never mind, we have. So it might look differently. So we don't know. So we want to make sure we have all that done first. And there'll be an interview process for that. In interest of people changing?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So where it lands might look a little bit different. And as soon as we know, we'll have that out. So let me see what else is on here before I... Nothing. Oh, back. Question and answers. All right. So before I sort of get to if you have any other questions, when I say this is the very beginning, because now once all this happens December 1st, kind of is when our real work starts. Because I can't guarantee you, and I want to say this now really clearly, that we won't change anything. Right? Because we just made projections. We said we think this is going to work. We have lots of people invested in helping us. Your leadership team has been excellent in being honest with us and sharing concerns, and we've got it like our last work day, a long list of let's watch these things. Here's what I'm worried about in this. So we're gonna have to make corrections along the way, right? And we hope that you'll help us with that. Right? So if you see things that maybe your team leader or your admin assistant or your QA person or someone doesn't, make sure and let me know, right? You can email me really easily through your Gmail. You just put my name in and it comes up, right? Share it with us. We'll have some processes. I think we'll probably put some questions out over the next year or so, like say, how's it going from a DSP perspective? What could we learn? What could we do better? But you don't have to wait for those opportunities to tell us if you see, what you think is a train wreck. Like, I see this train wreck coming. We hope you don't. I don't anticipate it, but we want to be prepared for it. We want everyone to know, this is not something that we can't look at again and see if we don't need to adjust, right? And who knows, after the elections, there's new administrations and they appoint new people to these positions, and who knows what other change might come our way, but we'll just sort of keep you posted as that happens. Is there something you want to add, Jackie? Thank you. Sarah, anything? All right, how about those of you in the room? Do you have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes?
When we met in our last big IS team meeting, a lot of this was explained to us, but we were told that our IS department would be merging with SLP. And
Oh.
What's that going to look like? How will that change things for us?
All right, that's a really good question, and a piece that I kind of left out of here, and I should have brought that up. And I don't have a chart to show you this, so we will attach that to the video that we send out as well. The organizational chart had to change to do this, right? So we did all this great work, and I think it was excellent, and we had good outcomes where we created Horizons, and then we had the Roots team in a separate little group, and then we had Supported Living in another group, and IS in another. That brought us great things, and we learned a lot doing it. But you can't create larger caseloads like that. So we had to do two things, and I'm going to break them up, and eventually I'll get to your question, your answer, okay? First, we had to undo the separation between Supported Living and Horizons. Right? And here's why. You can't, if you want a larger caseload, you have to be able to balance it. And so 4 homes where 3 people live is like 40 staff sometimes. But if you created a caseload of there's 3 people who live here and 2 people who live here, and Johnny who lives by himself and Sarah who lives over here, that has less, it has less FTE to it. And that is really the big chunk of a team leader's job, is helping make sure you have all the tools you need to do your job, right? And understand everything you need. So we had to separate those two. So Ginger, so it looks a little different. Ginger, who used to be our executive residential operations person for supported living at IS, will now have Horizons and have a couple team leaders. I wish I could remember who the area directors were. Leslie and Michelle, thank you. So it'll be Leslie and Michelle, which is a big combination of supported living licensed homes and 24-hour licensed homes. So I really need to get this org chart out so you can see it. So that'll look differently than Flory, who used to have just Horizons, now has Angie's area, which is part of Horizons, and then our Eugene Services, which is also part of Horizons, but has a lot of development to do and then some administrative things. Okay. So now where that looks at is what's happening with IS, right? That leaves IS is still is still pretty unique. So this actually, right now we're kind of still working through that. IS, the intention isn't really for it to combine with supported living, but more look at having our quality and person-centered services director, thank you. Moving IS under that, right now she manages Tapestry Services, which is a lot, in many ways, has a lot in common with IS. So it's going to be more about Tapestry and IS looking at how you partner, not supported living. Does that answer your question? And that's all still, that's going to be after all this gets done. We'll start having those conversations of how that looks. Yes?
And I think we also looked at a couple of people who are in supported living that might be better served in IS.
There you go.
And so there's a few that would go over potentially. So we're still looking at that.
So if you,
I work for both.
right. So if you didn't hear what Jackie just said, is there also, in doing this and making the caseloads, there were a few people that we support in supported living who really also look a lot more like an IS service, even though they're funded through supported living, so they did move over to IS. So that might be what they were talking about. Okay, so IS still has some change to come, not necessarily in how it's going to affect you, but what that structure piece looks like.
Well, the person I support has been asking, what does this mean to me? What's going to happen? And I said, I'm not sure. And so I said, ask Sarah Smith. And she's like, okay.
Right, well, that's a good answer. What I hope is it will mean that she'll see very little difference. Right, it's up here. These changes for the people we support should be up here. And what happens on the ground for people, I'm hoping that you won't see any, especially in that change. It's just a matter of how to make all the numbers work so nobody's too overwhelmed, and there was a little bit of room, a little bit more room over there for that. And they sort of fit into that as well. Like you work in both places, so does that make sense? So that part of it still has a little bit of bugs to work out, but we're continuing to meet and figure that out.
Yeah, because my roommate also works for DCL. She says, well, you're Tapestry, aren't you? And I said, well, no, I was going to be, but then I didn't. She goes, I heard you're Tapestry. I was like, what?
No.
Okay, now I know what she's talking about. All right.
Did you have anything to say about that, Sarah?
Just that we'll be having what Joanne
Right.
said, further conversation about how those departments.
Right. What's unique about Tapestry and IS is their billable hours. Right, so it's very different in 24-hour and supported living, where we have a bundled service where we get paid an amount, and the DSP